Question: how do you make the United States Congress do what you want it to do? Answer: buy it.
How can that be done?
By making sure that a majority of senators and congresspersons are in your pocket, so to speak.
You mean bribe them?
If supporting candidates with massive campaign contributions so that they will do your bidding if they are elected is bribery, then yes, you've hit the nail on the head.
But isn't bribery illegal?
It should be, but very little seems to be done about it. The staggering amounts of money spent on U.S. elections means that it is virtually impossible to tell where campaign contributions originate, and to make things easier, the United States Supreme Court in January 2010 reversed 20 years of restrictions on corporate campaign contributions.
If I wanted to buy Congress, which candidates should I choose? Democrats or Republicans?
Both. Then you can't lose. The winner does what he's told, and the loser isn't going to report you for breaking campaign contribution rules because they've already accepted your tainted money in return for promises to further your political agenda. The system is as safe as houses, the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate.
But who would have enough money to do all this?
That's an easy one. AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. And if you're wondering where they get the money from, a lot of it comes from the American taxpayer. Every year, loyal U.S. citizens dutifully pay their federal taxes, which are then used for many purposes, one of which is to supply aid in various forms to Israel, currently estimated at being about $3 billion per year. Some of this aid is used to buy U.S.-made weapons, which allow Israel to continuously threaten its neighbors and enables them to finance the hugely expensive apartheid wall, effectively fencing off the Palestinians and making them prisoners in their own land. It is self-evident that some of this money is bound to find its way back to the United States to be used to top up the election campaign funds for politicians, who, when elected, will be very keen to vote even more aid to Israel next time around. So, not only are American taxes being used to support the apartheid state of Israel, some of that money is being used to help elect candidates who are more interested in getting re-elected than they are in America's best interests, which means that Americans are actually paying for the demise of their own democracy. Yet democracy is something which successive U.S. presidents have been crying out is a basic right for everyone on the planet. What hypocrisy! It doesn't much matter which candidate wins, Democrat or Republican, or at what level, congressperson, senator, vice president, or president. He or she, having taken the proverbial 30 pieces of silver, is now expected to do AIPAC's bidding. The penalty for not doing so being the withholding of campaign funds when the next election circus comes to town. But before we take a look at their agenda, I want to explain my pronunciation of the name. In all of these words, the AI combination sounds different. Diamond, daily, pair. So we have a choice. I suspect that the organization prefers AIPAC to deflect attention away from the fact that it has little to do with A for America or Americans. So I prefer to call it AIPAC, because it is definitely I for Israel-centric, as we shall see. The AIPAC Policy Conference is the pro-Israel community's preeminent annual gathering. The event attracts more than 6,000 community and student activists from all 50 states, and more than half of the Senate, a third of the House of Representatives, and countless Israeli and American policymakers and thought leaders, and so on and so forth. But it's a one-way street. Take a look at some of the issues on the agenda. You won't find much that has to do with America or Americans. Example: Israel didn't like the Goldstone report on its savage attack on Gaza in December 2008 and January 2009, so AIPAC pushed the United States Senate to vote to rescind United Nations support for the report and take no further action against Israel under its recommendations. The resolution, which passed by unanimous consent on April 14th and was sponsored by Senators Kirsten Gillibrand and Jim Risch, comes after Justice Richard Goldstone retracted the central claims of his controversial report that falsely accused Israel of targeting civilians during its caste-led military campaign. For the record, Goldstone, who was a Zionist, was put under enormous pressure by Israel to make his retractions. But the Pandora's box of Israeli atrocities had already been opened.
4 people died here, all women, shot. Having bulldozed the place, the Israelis destroyed the village water tower. The only houses left standing were those the occupying troops had camped in, or positioned snipers in. In the house they'd occupied, Israeli soldiers left some writing on the wall. "Gaza, here we are," one read. "You can run, but you can't hide. Make war, not peace. Arabs need to die. If you can take it, there is worse to come." Zaytun, a few miles north, also flattened by Israeli bulldozers. But in this house, they'd herded 100 members of the Samuni clan. And then they shelled it, killing 49 of them. The mass funeral wake is in its final day.
In September 2009, Judge Goldstone had this to say.
The mission concluded that actions amounting to war crimes, and possibly in some respects crimes against humanity, were committed by the Israel Defense Force.
But in his recent retraction, Goldstone now characterizes the killing of 29 members of the Samuni family as an accident.
She's saying if it was an accident, why they could enter our home with 18 members in it and kill my husband, murder him in front of all of these kids.
So why are these two trying to cover up Israel's appalling human rights record? And what's the going rate for that service rendered by this pair of Roman Catholic senators, one Democrat and one Republican? 30 pieces of silver for their campaign coffers? Or a bit more to take care of inflation? Or what about swimming pools for their back gardens? I wonder if they've seen what the IDF did with their battle tanks in some poor Palestinian's back garden, or rather the agricultural fields that their very livelihoods depend upon.
Well, the United States supports Israel in a variety of ways. We give them all sorts of military and economic support, roughly $3 billion a year. Israel, despite the fact it is a relatively rich country, receives more foreign aid than any other country in the world. We veto resolutions in the United Nations all the time that are critical of Israel.
Ceux qui sont contre, 14 voix pour, une voix contre. Le projet de résolution n'est pas adopté par suite du vote négatif d'un membre permanent du Conseil.
Those against?
Those against? Ceux qui sont contre.
And the United States is actually talking about using military force against Iran. Now the question is, why is the United States so deeply concerned about Iran acquiring nuclear weapons? The reason it is that big a deal at this point in time is because of pressure from the lobby. Thank you. The article basically says that inside the United States there is a powerful interest group that is deeply committed to shaping American foreign policy in ways that work to the benefit of Israel. And second, the article argues that the policies that the United States ends up pursuing in the Middle East because of the lobby's force in the decision-making process are not in the American national interest.
There's a new day in America between Christians and Jews. We don't agree on everything, but we agree on this, that we are going to be together, inseparable in the defense of Israel and the Jewish people.
What AIPAC did, some members of the United States Congress, rather, they put in resolutions condemning Libya, and they just kept them in the resolutions with Syria and with Iran and with Iraq. They kept putting them in that in resolution and kept pushing for all kinds of sanctions, all kinds of action against them. And of course, I voted against the resolution, and others started voting against it. And I think what later I found out, what really made them angry, other members of Congress came to me and wanted to know what was happening, and I was telling them, we're trying to negotiate.
So what happened?
I was looking at CNN. Several people had called me and told me what they had seen and heard, and they told me, look at CNN. And they flooded the radio and TV with commercials. Those commercials, and you have to understand the mode that the country was in. We had just gone through 9/11, and most Americans didn't know Hussein from Gaddafi or Gaddafi from bin Laden. They didn't know the difference. They all saw them as the same. And the commercial, many commercials, put me with them, saying I supported them.
Support and finance international terrorism.
And we cannot talk about anti-Semitism. So we're going to be... Young Jews are being silenced on campus. I went to Brandeis University. I was not allowed to speak out about my
jornada intensa de activismo en contra de la organización AIPAC se vivió en Washington. Varias organizaciones religiosas y de activistas en pro de los derechos humanos se manifestaron frente al centro de convenciones donde AIPAC lleva adelante su conferencia anual.
Lo
que AIPAC hace es apoyar un malvado Israel. Esto ha sucedido desde el principio, en total contraste con el credo judío, de las enseñanzas tradicionales judías. Esto está mal. El oprimir a la gente de Palestina es vergonzoso para las comunidades judías, pues lo están haciendo en nuestro nombre. En varias ocasiones subió la tensión entre la policía y los manifestantes. La demostración incluyó la construcción del muro de la vergüenza y la reconstrucción de una Palestina libre. Según los manifestantes, el objetivo fue llamar la atención de quienes parecen ignorar los verdaderos propósitos de AIPAC.
Queremos crear conciencia en la gente de que AIPAC no nos representa y no representa a los americanos. Israel dice ser una democracia, pero no es verdad, y eso confunde a la ciudadanía. Queremos decirles que ya dejen de oprimir a los palestinos y de corromper a nuestro gobierno, especialmente al Congreso.